It is the first day of December. Welcome to your Voice of Future Town Hall. We welcome back two of our favorites, Sam Faddis and Mr. Operative. Sam, over the weekend, President Trump made it clear that he did not authorize the second boat strike in Venezuelan waters, and that he has spoken to his Secretary of War himself, and he assured him that he did not authorize the strikes. But here we are today, and his press secretary, Caroline Levitt, confirmed that himself did authorize the second boat attack, contradicting her boss. What do you make of all this?
Well, I'm as confused as anybody about the back and forth and the different stories. You know, what I think this gets to the heart of, honestly, Armstrong, is the justification for hitting the boats at all. And I'm not suggesting that I think the president does not have the authority to do that. But once you have made a decision that these people are combatants, the folks in the boats, then according to the law of war, honestly, at that point, you have no, I mean, you are fully entitled to kill them. You're not required to, just because you wounded them, stop killing them. And that's ugly and nasty and brutish, and that's the nature of combat. So I think it puts into relief for everybody exactly what we're talking about. This is not a video game. These guys are real people, and they die horribly when we strike them. Again, that's not me saying that we shouldn't do that. We just should understand what it is we are doing and the true nature of it.
So are you placing this in the context of war? Because to date, 80 have died. You know, I think many people get the fact that if you've lost a son or daughter, a loved one to fentanyl, where they're adding and lacing these drugs, and the impact that it's having on cities and communities out of this country, I get that. But I'm more intrigued that you're putting this in the same context if you're literally on the battlefield.
Well, I think legally it has to go one way or the other, and I say this not having just been an intelligence officer, but being an attorney and having been a JAG officer in the military. If they're not combatants, if we're not treating them according to the law of war, then we need to be intercepting them and making an effort to arrest them and treating this as a law enforcement matter. My understanding is the administration is not proceeding in that fashion. They have said they have the authority to simply kill these individuals. I think they are designating them as terrorists. And at that point, they are effectively governed by the law of war. And in war, which again is ugly and horrible and nasty and brutish, I'm not in, you know, if I have the enemy at a disadvantage and I can kill him, and that is what I do. And that is horrible to say, but that is the reality. So
even if they're drug traffickers and you did not succeed in taking them all out at once, and you look at the live feed and you see two clinging for life on the boat itself, you're going to say, go back in and finish what you start. Kill them.
Well, I understand the president says that he doesn't agree with that and he would not have authorized.
That's what he said.
What he said.
Yes.
But according to the law of war, until such time, and again, we are either employing those rules or we're employing the rules that require us to attempt to arrest these guys and treat it as a law enforcement matter. It's got to go into one of those two baskets. And as I understand it, the administration is treating them as combatants. Until such time as that individual effectively surrenders to me, according to the law of war, you can kill him. And again, I don't think that's cool. I think that's horrifying, which is the nature of war and why we should probably not be in such a hurry to get into them so often, because this is what happens in a war. People die horribly.
Let me turn to you, Mr. Operative, because you've been watching closely the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. And obviously, everybody is still up in an uproar over the Leak-Witkoff conversation. And you know, Witkoff is meeting with Putin later in the week. Let's just deal with the misinformation and disinformation that's out there surrounding these negotiations and put in perspective exactly where we are.
Marshawn, I think one of the key factors that has come up in all of these discussions is appears to be a profound lack of coordination and discussion at a command level, at negotiator level, who's in charge of which aspect of negotiations. None of this has been explained. Certainly, I mean, I have a very open mind and I have a high tolerance for ambiguity, but when you're going to do things like this, it's important to lay out a strategy. I don't understand why the president, who's a very good communicator, doesn't have a press conference, or not so much a press conference, but a statement from the Oval Office. Talk to the country and tell them what we're planning on doing. Not in excruciating detail, but at least lay out a strategic direction on where we are and where we're headed. Because at some point, Americans are going to get caught up in this and killed. And I've always been very cautious in my commentary about the agency in particular getting involved in the drug program, the counter narcotics program. I saw it when I was a cop in the 70s. And believe it or not, I don't think the price of heroin on the street has changed since the 70s. So the billions and billions of dollars that we've spent, we've not increased the cost of drugs. We haven't appreciably impacted the market space. It's a very complicated thing, and the cartels are willing to be outrageously savage when required. And when you start throwing steel at boats on the ocean, thinking the way they do, where if they launch boats, they'll launch 5 generally. There'll be 5 boats on the water. If they can afford to lose 2, and if they have 3 that get through, that pays for the cost and profit. If 4 get through or 5 get through, it's huge profit. But if you start impacting their bottom line on cost and operational formulas that they use for money and how they view our actions, what are we going to do when we get up one morning and there's 5 bodies suspended on ropes hanging under an overpass in Name Your City, USA? You're dealing with an enemy that it doesn't intimidate. And we do this ooh and ah stuff and shock and awe, and we've had all these stupid phrases that have come out of the mouths of senior officials over the last 30 years that mean nothing. There was no shock and awe. And when you're shooting at narcotics smugglers and you're killing people smuggling drugs, you've made the commitment, it seems to me, that you're not going to use a law enforcement solution. You're going to use the military. Why aren't these videos carefully scrutinized and edited before they're released? Why would you release the video, the gun camera video of somebody floating in the water hanging onto a piece of debris? I don't understand why that's allowed to occur.
But it did occur, and the world got a chance to see. You know, Sam, in your A&E magazine, as you were writing about the Afghan shooter, you discuss some things we know and things we need to find out about. What are the things that we need to find out about versus the things we know?
Well, look, in capsule form, as I understand it, based on all the information I've been able to access, this guy was an Afghan national, and he worked in a unit, one of several units in Afghanistan that was run by the CIA in cooperation with Afghan intelligence, and their job with embedded under the direction of CIA paramilitary officers was to hunt down and kill or capture Taliban personnel. The primary focus being to take out leadership on the Taliban side. So CIA ground branch officers run these units and direct them in combat, and that's what this guy did, and he hunted down our enemies. When Biden decided we were going to cut and run, he was brought to the United States along with a whole bunch of other people to be resettled here because obviously, once the Taliban was in charge, he would be hunted down and killed. That seems to me to be pretty clear. Where I get lost, or where I really begin to puzzle about it, is what happened to him afterward, because it appears that he and his family, having been brought here, I mean, they would be brought here by the U.S. government, but they were brought here because the CIA asked for them to be brought here because they had been working with us. And then at that point, it appears that the agency just washed their hands of this guy, and he and hundreds of others like him just got sort of dumped into the mix, and he ends up in Washington State, and the next thing you know, he's sitting with some menial job in a garbage apartment and so forth. So look, I'm not making excuses for this guy. He's a murderer, and as far as I'm concerned, after he's convicted, he should be executed. But the point is, the U.S. government, and the CIA in particular, has a lot of experience with doing this, which is bringing people that have worked for us abroad here because their lives are in danger. And one of the things we've learned over many, many decades is that it's really hard to resettle people. They don't just automatically come to the States and love it and settle in and everything's good. In fact, it's very easy for them to go off the rails, to want to return home. I mean, in the case of Russian defectors, the next thing you know, they're back in Russia working for the other side again. We know this, we understand that. In other words, you can't just bring the guy here and forget about him. You have to maintain contact, support him, check on him, do all of these things. And apparently that wasn't done in this case, and therefore I assume it wasn't done for any of the hundreds of others. And this guy just basically spiraled out of control. I mean, apparently, as people have been talking about him being suicidal for 2 years. He's been getting in a car and driving thousands of miles around the United States for no particular reason for 4 years. And why? Who was supposed to control this? Why did we take a guy with his background and his training and everything we know about how this plays and just bring him here, dump him, and forget about him, and then wait until something horrifying happened, like has happened?
And how many more out there are there exactly like him, lurking, willing, and able to do the same? We'll be back.
Yes.
John, I must tell you, Mr. Operative, I must tell you, against all the threats and the pushback from the highest levels of government, the Pope Leo XIV did go to Lebanon. Many of us did not realize the number of Christians and Catholics that are in Lebanon. It's unprecedented that the Pope did, and he made history while there, Mr. Operative.
That was a very important trip, and it's just amazing to me that so few people realize how beautiful Lebanon is and how unique it is culturally. It's such a rich history there, and it goes back to biblical times. And the fact that a pope had the stones to go, and he was warned by a number of countries, oh, you shouldn't go there. It's very dangerous. You shouldn't go. And he answered, the last clip I saw was the Queen of Jordan said, are you sure you should go? It's very dangerous. And he said, we are going, period. That's all he said. And then he went. and it turned out magnificently. And he saw something that few people get to see today. I've been all through those areas before Lebanon came apart at the seams back in the 80s and 90s. It's a breathtaking experience because it's like the Holy Land and the sites in Jordan and the sites in Israel. It's just rich history, and the architecture. You would be amazed at how many churches there are there and how many people of consequence in the Catholic faith are buried there. It's just a very powerful place. And the population of Lebanon rolled out, and a lot of those people lining the roads, they're Shia Arabs. They're not Christians or Catholics. They were cheering for the Pope. He's just a source of peace and hope for people, and it was just a magnificent thing to see. And I'm sure the Iranians were sweating bullets while that was going on.
You know, Sam, I want to go back to your A&D magazine, and you talk about a glimpse of the future of New York City and Mandami. And this is a quote from you, which we're going to ask you to build on. Exactly when did revolutionary communists ever confine themselves to working within the law? How does this apply to Mandami?
Well, what strikes me is that people who are analyzing Mamdani's victory and speculating about what he's going to do as the mayor, and I'm primarily obviously talk about folks who are not supporters of his, opponents of his, they focus on the likelihood that he's going to be able to get something passed as an ordinance in New York City and get the necessary support, or what technically the mayor's authority is as opposed to the governor. So you've got this guy who's a revolutionary communist who belongs to a party that literally describes the United States as a prison nation and says they want to burn the whole thing down. And then for some reason, we assume that this guy's going to worry about passing laws, changing ordinances, and working within the system. And it boggles my mind, honestly. I mean, that's not the way revolutionaries work, and there's no indication that that's going to be what happens. I mean, I think you're already starting to see with the actions against ICE on the streets of New York City precisely how this is going to play. People track ICE. When they start to take some action, then a mob appears. A few days ago, they literally drove ICE, assembled hundreds of people, and forced ICE to flee Manhattan and go across through the tunnel and across to Jersey. And afterward, the New York City police commissioner, who is going to remain under Mandami, contacted ICE and blamed them for the problem and effectively told them to knock it off and stay out of the city. So there's no law, there's no ordinance, the city council didn't do anything. This is mob rule. This is the way revolutions work, and I think that's exactly what you're going to see. You're going to see entire neighborhoods or chunks of one of the boroughs or multiple boroughs declare themselves autonomous zones, put up roadblocks and tell NYPD to get out. You're going to see entire apartment complexes with thousands of units that announce they're not paying rent anymore, and nobody from the city is allowed to come in because they're now a commune. And that guy, Mamdani, is not sending NYPD or any authority to challenge that. He's more likely to appear and stand on the barricades with these guys. And that's, in my view, that's the direction this is going to go, and people need to grasp that.
You know, something that's overlooked, Mr. Operative, is President Trump warning Israel not to interfere with Syria.
Yeah, the powder keg nature of the Middle East is it's always on a low boil, a slow boil, but it can flare up to a rolling boil over in 24 hours. And the situation in Syria is tenuous. There is a plethora of operational people from every group that you could probably put on a wiring diagram from the government that are represented in some way in that area. Very little press coverage was given to the drone attack and the missile attack on Khor Mor in the northern part of Iraq back at near the end of July. It happened. It caused a tremendous interruption in the power supply, a lot of fires, people were killed, and it barely hit a ripple on the news cycle, drowned out by other very important things. That whole area, Syria, the Levant, all the way across to the Mediterranean, and all the way across into the main huge cities of Iran, is unease and disorder. And we have never fully repaired or come to some fruition with what we did in 2003 in invading Iraq. Yes, Saddam is gone, and yes, the Ba'ath Party's gone, but it's hard to find a thread of success and stability outside of the Kurdish zones. The Kurds have managed to keep their wits about them, hold on to their real estate, and build a society and governance and peaceably have elections and change power. But you don't see that anywhere else in Iraq. And certainly in Syria, it's just a powder keg with a former Islamic radical, now the president of Syria.
You know, I'm going to turn our attention to something that's very similar to the terrorist attack when the assassin drove from Las Vegas to New York City and now from Washington State to Washington, D.C. Sam, I don't know if you saw Luigi Mangione with his court hearing today. In a gray suit, his handcuffs removed, fighting to exclude evidence from his trial. Remember, this is the same person who murdered the CEO, Brian Thompson, in cold blood. And watching that and looking at the defense's strategy is almost frightening.
Well, look, the guy, in my view, is an assassin. He's a stone-cold killer, no question. What happened here? What do the defense attorneys do? The defense attorneys are doing what they're required to do according to their ethical obligation, which is fight for this guy. Doesn't matter that they know better than anybody else, I'm sure, that he's guilty as charged and guilty of things he hasn't been charged with. But that's their only play, is to exclude this evidence, because if the evidence comes in, the boy's done. He's cooked.
But what about the supporters, the fans, the throngs of people there cheering him on as if he's some hero?
Yeah, that I agree with you, Armstrong, is the part that really sickens me and scares me and disturbs me, is this glorification of a guy who is a stone cold killer, who is an assassin, who murders somebody in cold blood. The idea that anybody's going to try to glorify that kind of thing. I find that sort of element really scary for what it says about our society, honestly, beyond this case, that you could get a following for that kind of thing. Very troubling.
You know, Mr. Operative, can we talk about President Trump's interference and contradictions across Latin America? Because you were talking about, you're concerned about his policy with Ukraine and Russia. Well, what about across Latin America?
That's a great question, Armstrong, because that's one of the most complex areas that I saw in my professional career. Every country's different. There are certain aspects of each society that make them unique. And you can't have a one-size-fits-all policy. Today, in today's world, you need to have individual policies that are woven into a mosaic of your overall policy for the division, say, design. We have these artificial barriers and wiring diagrams that we put together inside the government, and over time they become the guideposts on how we formulate policy based on geography and artificial lines that are drawn on maps. It doesn't work that way. In an instant communications society that we have today, you have to come up with was one of the discussions that came out about Iraq, Iran, and Syria. They're inexplicably linked together by geography, by culture, by religion, by political party design, and most importantly, the vast network of tribes. And we dismiss those things at a senior level of our own government. You can't dismiss that. I mean, I remember Rumsfeld screaming out in a meeting that that's old think. I don't want to hear it again. Tribes are old think. Yes, they are old think. And a whole big area of the world, in that part of the world, is part of that tribal mosaic. You can't just wish it away. And Latin America is a similar complex area. And I'm very concerned about what I see of us running around like a guy with a gas can and a road flare setting fire to stuff. And Sam brought this up perfectly early on by saying we have numbed ourselves to the atrocious nature of killing other people. We talk about it now like it's just a video game. When you shoot a Hellfire missile at a speedboat and you splatter people all over the ocean, and people are numb to that today. And they just talk about it like it's part of some video game that they're playing. It's not a game. Well, and when you're on the ground doing that, you got to expect you're making enemies every time you shoot somebody.
Well, let me add this as I wrap this segment up and we go to break and come back with Steve Laffey. So Sam, I want to piggyback on what Mr. Operative is saying about Latin America. What about Trump's interference in Honduras elections? Don't you think there's some kind of contradiction on his U.S. war on drugs? Let me just tell you, he said, Sam, he would pardon the former president, Hernandez, who was convicted in this country, Sam, for drug trafficking, okay? For drug trafficking. Isn't that a contradiction?
Here's one thing I can guarantee you, Armstrong. It will most definitely be perceived as a contradiction. The people in the region we're talking about will not look at that thing and work overtime to rationalize some explanation for how it all makes sense. They will say, this guy skated because he was connected, and this guy is not connected, so you're going to go after him.
Well, it's coinciding with the general election on Sunday. That's why he's doing it in that Central American country.
Right, and that is precisely the way it is perceived on the ground. I will guarantee you that.
Yes. Sam Faddis, Mr. Operative, thank you for joining us. Your voice, your future. We'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, Steve Laffey, there's no doubt that gold and silver is soaring at an all-time high, and that BRICS is doing everything it can to challenge the currency standard for the world, the US dollar. And the dollar continues to suffer. I mean, it's battered and bruised. What does this indicate to you about our economy and American standing in the global markets?
Well, the dollar was very strong until Donald Trump took office. Dropped about 10% from January till today, roughly speaking, across many currencies. Across some currencies are much weaker, like don't be in Turkey today. You have a terrible time buying anything. But I think what it's saying is that we're putting off so much to the future, and we continue to spend, Armstrong. And while there are new tax cuts and some tailwinds in AI for next year, people who have real money are very worried, combined with the fact that the gold, most of the gold buying that has taken gold to above $4,200 an ounce, and the silver up to $54 an ounce or so today, most of the gold is about countries buying gold, not people. So remember when the United Kingdom got out of all its gold, when it was $400 an ounce? Well, they want it back at 4,000, folks. So it may be a contrary indicator, but usually when gold is this high, it's telling you something is wrong about the future. And the U.S. dollar is remarkably strong, giving our wayward spending, our deficits, which is still going to be in this fiscal year, $1.8 trillion, just like last year, $1.8 trillion under Biden, $1.8 trillion under Trump. And you wonder to yourself, can we still do this much longer? Can we run a 40% deficit of what we take in? Can we have a 1.8 trillion divided by the interest on the debt is over $1 trillion. The budget deficit is now 5.9% of our gross domestic product. That's what happens in World War II, not an economy growing at 2%, which brings you back to the next part. We're only still growing roughly at 2%. When Reagan was around, it was 4 and 5%. And if we're ever going to get out of this jam, we need to at least grow to 4 to 5% per year.
You know, one of the debates that is taking place this week when Congress returns on tomorrow, Steve, is whether or not to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Everybody knew that the day would come when these subsidies would expire, and these subsidies was used to mask against what would happen of the true impact of affordable care. And just an explosion increases in what everyday Americans, poor Americans, would pay, some paying as much as an additional $1,000 a month. Trump has made it clear that he does not want the subsidies extended, but members of Congress, especially in the Senate and the House that are up for re-election and realize that the midterm election is around the corner, feel they have no choice but to protect as many of those 10 million Americans that will be affected if they suddenly bring a halt to these subsidies.
I mean, subsidies are generally bad, and the day to pay the piper, when it comes, generally comes immediately. So this is a very tough thing that's going to be happening over the next month. The middle class, the lower middle class, which has gotten these subsidies, depends upon it. And remember, look what's happened to the middle class just this year. Versus Joe Biden taking over as president, the cost of a mortgage has doubled, right? So that's why the first-time home buyer is 40 years old, not 28 like it was when I bought a home for the first time, when I was 28 or so. So you take things like car loans are being put out to be in 7 years. 22% of all the new car loans are 7-year loans, and that means you're always underwater until like year 5 or 6, right? So you have now the health care. The student loans came back, rightfully so. Remember, we subsidized under President Trump, putting it in abeyance to not pay these loans. So all of this is coming back. And these are the things that are facing the headwinds, especially for the middle class, which has gone from 60% of the economy down to like 48% of the economy in the last 15 years. So I don't know what they're going to do. but they shut the government down for 43 days over it and didn't decide, Armstrong. So what we can say about our leaders is that they're pretty feckless and don't know what they're doing. That's why 51 of them are getting ready to leave.
And Steve, what about the deficit?
We have no indication that there's a single person left, except for Tom Massey, maybe, and not even Rand Paul, who wants to deal with the deficit in a way that would be truthful to the American people. I ran for president on this issue, and if someone was truthful about it, we would have a terrible 1 or 2 years in this country, and then we would turn things around. Because we can't just tell people no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. We also can't have a system where the old people take from the young people. But think about it, folks. How long can you go personally if you make $100 grand and spend $140 grand? How far can you go? I mean, consumers are doing it. Credit card debt hit an all-time high this week, right? So people are trying to do it, but in the end, people have to come to the like, oh, honey, we can't do this anymore. Whereas so far, America is not, because of the willingness to take dollars. And you mentioned the BRICS at the beginning, but people don't know. Brazil, Russia, India, China, they do want to replace the US dollar. Thank God they're dictatorships, terrible countries, no rule of law, and that's why they can't do it. We still are the bastion of hope. But at some point, no one's going to want any of these US dollars, and it's all going to happen very fast. My prediction for next year is that it's going to be about oil. Oil will be much higher, and it'll be another giant headwind for the economy. It's cheap right now.
Are wages actually keeping pace with inflation for everyday Americans? And how dangerous is the explosion in credit card and household debt, Steve?
Yeah, they are not keeping. So when in Trump's first presidency, let's just go back to 2016 and 2020, real wages for middle-class workers actually were ahead of inflation. We had very low inflation. Under Biden, it totally turned around. Like, the average American just got hosed. That's the best way to say it. And they know it. And that's why they were so mad during these elections, because they expected Donald Trump to bring it down. But this year, 45% of people are not keeping up with inflation, workers' wages. Wage growth is very low, and productivity, which is supposed to be coming with AI and all these other things, hasn't really hit America yet, if it's coming at all. So you add in the credit card debt, where it's up 6% year over year, $1.23 trillion in credit card debt in America alone. These are unsustainable numbers. And in credit card debt, Armstrong, we are, as Americans, are 7% in arrears. That's a number that was seen in 2008 when we had a crisis. But today there's no crisis for whatever reason. We just keep humming along at 2%. And so there's a real danger in all this. I mean, people are behind in their credit cards. They're behind in their student loans. They're behind in their mortgages. This is going to be, at some point, probably by June, and this is the worst time to happen for Republicans, we're going to see a real slowdown in the economy.
At what point does, Sam, consumer borrowing become an economic breaking point?
At what point does it become an economic breaking point?
Yes, Steve.
I would have thought by now, but for some reason, we just keep going on. And maybe this is the hidden part. Even with the tariffs, Armstrong, the American people are just fairly productive. They are putting off some of the things that they need to do, like buying homes. Remember, of all the homes bought last year, 40% were bought by people over 60. They're not buying their first home, generally speaking. They're buying their second home. And so the breaking point is about here. And the only thing that keeps it from happening is the ability for interest rates to stay relatively low. They're at, the 10-year bond is like 4.09%. If it hits 6, it starts moving up. That's the breaking point, because that'll break the U.S. Treasury.
Well, are interest rates helping inflation or making consumer survival even harder?
Interest rates by the Fed, when they started lowering rates a year ago, the 10-year bond yield 3.67. Today it's higher. Usually it should be lower. And the more that they cut rates, I think the higher you're going to see long-term rates, the ones that people depend upon for mortgages. And this is why we should not have the president talking about cutting rates. We should be talking about fiscal discipline. Cutting rates isn't going to help anything. Ask yourself a question out there. To get a car loan, a mortgage loan, who cares whether the Fed fund rates is 4 or 3.5? Nobody. It only takes money away from your mutual fund cash. That's all it does. The other stuff's based upon the real markets out there, the 10-year bonds and what people refinance their apartments on. So they don't seem to know what they're doing. They seem to be trying to convince themselves, with Scott Bessent, our U.S. Treasury Secretary, is also trying to convince people that tokenization of crypto will take care of a lot of these problems because they have to hold a lot of this crypto now in U.S. Treasuries. Just so you know, everybody, and some of these stable coins, it's $170 billion of treasuries. The 17th largest holding of treasuries is stable coins today. If that continues forever, God bless them. I just don't think it can.
I'm just curious from your experience that you feel how much of today's price hike, Steve, are due to corporate pricing power versus, let's say, true cost pressures.
I would say half and half. I would say lots of corporations like Apple Computer, large corporations dominate today. For example, when you think about 30 years ago, you wanted a hammer. You get 7 places to get a hammer. Today it's Home Depot and Lowe's in an oligopoly, right? So I'm being very simple. How many places can you buy a computer? Where would you buy a computer? A lot of this stuff is taken over by large and powerful corporations who really did in the small business. And the small businesses really used to be the engine of our growth and where lots of middle-class people worked. Today it's not. I would say half and half, that they are absorbing tariffs, passing half of it along, eating half of it, and would like to pass more of it along, but they can't do it that quickly, whether they're Costco or Home Depot or whatever it may be. Because moving it back to U.S. manufacturing, Armstrong, we've lost 69,000 manufacturing jobs this year. Not gained, lost. And that's middle-class workers.
Steve Laffey, it's always a pleasure having you on. Thank you for joining us. When we return, Liana Werner-Gray will be on to discuss MAHA, Making America Healthy Again. We'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Liana, thank you for joining us on this broadcast. Tell us what shocked you most about American eating habits when you arrived from the Outback.
I was shocked how normal all of the processed food is and the junk food is. Like, it's just everywhere. Airports, on the planes, everywhere. And just how normal it is, how accepted it is. And that's a huge problem when it becomes normal.
Well, talk us through your personal story, because you can speak directly to this. How did your junk food addiction begin and spiral totally out of control?
Yeah, so I actually grew up very healthy in the middle of Australia, in the outback, in a town called Alice Springs. And I attended an Aboriginal school, which is the Indigenous Australians. So I had a very natural upbringing, was not allowed to eat lollies or candy, and was barely even allowed to watch TV. And then when I moved away to go to university, to Brisbane City, I lived across from a 7-Eleven, and I had no parents around to tell me what to eat, what not to eat. And so I started to indulge in fast foods. Every single meal I ate was a junk food. So I would eat gummy bears for breakfast, I would eat Pizza Hut for lunch, McDonald's for dinner. And I just repeated that and very quickly became addicted. And because after we eat that way for a while, it changes our cellular memory. And then all of a sudden we are just craving it like crazy. And so I did that for 5 years, and it was just horrendous. And then I ended up hitting rock bottom with my health.
What did you balloon to?
What did I balloon to?
Yes.
Oh, as in size, weight?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I was 2 sizes heavier than I am now, and so we're in kilos there, and so I was probably like 15. I was 15 pounds heavier then. Having a lot of excess weight doesn't really run in my family but what runs in my family is cancer and depression. And so because we're quite just naturally thin, so I was much heavier for my frame and felt uncomfortable all the time. But that the weight was the least of my issues. While I felt heavy, having that extra 15 pounds that I have now, being 16 years later, the main issue was cancer and depression.
So what role did processed food play in your tumor diagnostic?
Well, I believe all of it, especially because my tumor was in my lymphatic system, which is the body's surge system. And if you put too much toxins into the lymphatic system, into the body, it can't do its job. And so it usually backfires and causes some kind of health issue like cancer. And we are what we eat. And there's a lot of studies, in my book, I have a ton of studies and science that all points to up to 70% of cancer is caused by diet alone.
Well, what exactly is the Earth Diet philosophy, Liana?
Yeah, so when I was 21, I got diagnosed with the 3.7 centimeter tumor in my lymphatic system. And then I was like, okay, I cannot keep eating like this. I have to go back to nature. And because of my upbringing with the indigenous people, I knew that the healthiest way for us to eat is to go out to our own backyard and just eat food straight from the tree, straight from the bush, straight from the earth. So I created the Earth Diet, and it started as a blog. And the challenge was to eat only foods from the earth for 365 days. And every time I had a craving for something, because at this point I was a junk food addict. So whenever I craved something, I would make it using natural whole ingredients that come straight from nature. So I have a ton of recipes for things like chocolate peanut butter cups or chicken nuggets with almond flour and turmeric and some sea salt cooked in coconut oil or avocado oil. And so I found a way to come up with Earth Diet recipes for all of our favorite foods, especially our pleasurable junk foods that we love to eat.
How does food addiction, Liana, compare to, let's say, drug or alcohol addiction?
It's the same thing. They are all addiction. Food addiction is the most accepted addiction that we see because it kills people slowly, versus alcohol and drugs is more serious and can kill people a lot quicker. But food is just as bad, and it's a long, slow process. So it's a big issue in our society. And eating natural foods that come straight from nature can help break that addiction because it changes our cellular memory. After 3 months and after new cellular turnover, you will just naturally notice that you will crave healthier things. Like if you can give up refined white sugar and say, okay, for 3 months, no matter what, I'm only going to have natural sugars, honey, maple syrup, dates, fruits, and eat only that whenever I have a craving. After 3 months, you will try the refined white sugar or corn syrup and you will reject it. Your body will not like the taste of it. It just doesn't have an appeal anymore because of the cellular memory changing.
Why do you think America is so uniquely vulnerable to diet-related disease?
This is where all the convenience foods started and they were accepted. And you can see advertisements going back in magazines from 60s, 70s, 80s saying that sugar is good, that cigarettes are good. And this is where all the marketing started. So it was really America that I guess was the guinea pig for all of these convenience foods and junk foods and refined sugars. And people just trusted the media. Just went for it, totally trusted it.
I think the big question is, which confuses so many people, Liana, is exactly what is healthy food?
Healthy food is food that comes straight from nature that God has created. It's so simple, but I know me being in the junk food world, it can be confusing. But if nature created it, if God created it and intended for us to eat it, that is healthy. Versus anything created in a lab or anything that man has had a hand in, we need to be very suspect of. And nowadays, even foods that grow naturally in nature, because man has come in with the pesticides and contaminated water, contaminated air. So even our natural foods can be contaminated also. And that's why we need to know the farmers that we're buying from. We need to know if it's organic or regenerative organic is the future. That is the healthiest way that we could ever eat is regenerative organic foods.
How can parents immediately reverse damage in their children's diets?
Well, going back to nature and making upgrades. I call them upgrades. So if they like mac and cheese, make sure that the pasta it's an organic pasta that is not contaminated with glyphosate, or a really good gluten-free one, because these days you can't even tell if it's gluten-free pasta. Making sure the dairy is high quality dairy, organic dairy, making sure there's no preservatives in there, no colors, no artificial flavorings, no refined sugars, all of that crazy stuff. There is an upgrade for every single thing that people want to eat: crackers, pasta, chips, lollies. But getting back to nature and eating foods that come straight from the earth. So a lot of dark leafy greens, vegetables. But probably the quickest, easiest, most affordable hack that I always tell everyone is to get liquid chlorophyll. You can get it for under $20 from Amazon, and you drop it in water every single morning. And if you make that the very first thing that you drink and give it to your kids, it also doesn't have a taste. So even the pickiest eater can drink it, and it helps to alkalize the body. It helps to put oxygen into the body. It helps to train the cells to resonate towards healthier things. And it also is said to be at the frequency of 528 hertz, which is the frequency that heals and repairs DNA. So if anyone is going through health issues, it's a really quick way to just get that momentum going and to start eating healthy. And the biggest solution to all of this is everyone growing their own garden, which I know is a big thing, but maybe people can dream about it and plan it for the future, or have a community garden in your community that you can all take care of, and you can all grow food seasonally, and you don't have to put pesticides on it, and you are in control then. That way you're not relying on big food and big ag for your food.
In 20 seconds, if the food system stays the same, what will American health look like in 10 years?
We will have 80% of people having cancer in 10 years, and people just living with chronic illness and it just being normal, and a lot more depression as well. Right now, it's 40% of people will get diagnosed with cancer in a lifetime. So if it continues the way it does, it's not looking good.
80%. Wow. That is really frightening. Look, Liana, Werner-Gray, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your book. It's on Amazon.com. What's the name of the book again?
It's The Earth Diet and Cancer Free with Food. And thank you so much for having me.